I'm here today with Marilyn van DerBur. Marilyn was crowned Miss America and then graduated from the University of Colorado with Phi Beta Kappa honors. Marilyn chose motivational speaking as a career and was named Outstanding Speaker in America. Marilyn's worst nightmare came true when she was 53. A newspaper reporter learned that she was an incest survivor, and the next morning it was a front page story in the Denver Post. Within weeks, over 3,000 men and women came forward in the greater Denver area for help and support. Marilyn immediately found an organization called Survivor United Network. Up to 500 people came to SUN each week for help and support groups. During the past 30 years, Marilyn has spoken in over 500 cities. She never leaves the room until men and women have personally said everything they need and want to say. The culmination of Marilyn's work is her book, Miss America by Day, Lessons Learned from Ultimate Betrayals and Unconditional Love. In it, she shares knowledge and insights through stories that are riveting and instructive. It's now in its 10th printing and is graded a 5-star on Amazon. Marilyn spends hours each day responding to survivors. She has answered tens of thousands of letters and emails. Many survivors have written to her on a weekly basis for years. She continues to answer each email until the survivor feels strong enough to move on. Recently, Marilyn was given the Lifetime Achievement Award for Philanthropy at the Colorado chapter of the Association of Fundraising Professionals. You can learn more about Marilyn and all of her work at missamericabyday.com. So Marilyn, welcome and congratulations on all that you've done. It's just such an amazing story.
I've had an interesting life. Thank you.
Well, just the fact that you've given back and helped so many people. I mean, obviously you've got a few years, under your belt, but, you've used them incredibly wisely.
Thank you. I was actually given a privilege. I thought when my story went public, it was the worst day of my life. I was 53, and it actually turned out to be the first day of the rest of a very new life. And what I thought was the end of respect for me and all the awards and titles meant nothing. It actually, at 53, began an entirely new life for me of reaching out and helping tens of thousands of men and women who are locked in secret and shame, as I was for 53 years. I would never have gone public with this. Never. My shame was so overwhelming. When I saw it on the front page of the Denver Post, I just thought, this is the end of everything I've worked for. And it actually turned out to be just the opposite.
Wow. Well, one of the authors that I've worked with in the past is Frederick Buechner, and he wrote an essay called The Stewardship of Pain. And it seems to me that you've been a very good steward of the pain that you suffered in your life.
The pain was overwhelming. And what I needed most of all during the years that I thought I might not get through it was just to meet one woman who has survived what is the healing process, which we call recovery. I kept saying to my husband, Larry, if you could just find one woman who's gotten through this, maybe I'll never get through it. I never found her. And it is very important to me that I now am that woman. Men and women can look at me and see that I have found peace and joy. I got through it.
Wow. So as I mentioned, you wrote a book about this, called Miss America by Day, Lessons Learned from Ultimate Betrayals and Unconditional Love. What led to you writing that book?
Well, when my story went public when I was 53, book publishers called and movie producers called, and I just said, never, I'll never do it. And then I started speaking in cities, and people line up for 2 to 3 hours to tell me their stories. And I think I wrote the book 12 years later. I waited 12 years. One reason was to kind of give a roadmap for survivors to show how I got through it. We all lead different journeys, but we have a lot in common. And I talk about how talk therapy just wasn't enough for me at all. I had to find different ways for healing. But I also wrote the book to educate. And I think I haven't heard this sentence a few times. I've heard this sentence hundreds of times. When I was 7 and my brother was 13, when I was 8 and my brother was 14, Only the ages changed. When I went to group support, there were 6 women. Half had been violated by older brothers.
Mm.
No one knows how to stop a man like my father, but we can stem the tide of teenagers inappropriately touching younger or less powerful children, and we do it by talking to them. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old boys and girls have a normal, natural sexual curiosity, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if they're sexual with a younger or less powerful child, there are long-term consequences, but they don't know that.
Mm.
You wouldn't give a 16-year-old the keys to your car without driving lessons and talking about DUIs. Parents need to sit down with their children and talk about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate as they grow into their sexuality. And being sexual with a younger or less powerful child is never okay.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So many authors that I work with talk about how when they write a book, of this nature, it really changes them just through the process. How did you find that?
Well, I wrote all during my recovery as a way of getting my feelings out. I had repressed all the memories and feelings, and if you repress feelings, they come up. They come up, and my daughter's age was always my trigger. So when she turned 13, I was 45. That was the end for me for 6 years until she turned 18. My father came into my room at night from the time I was 5 until I was 18.
Wow.
So I was not free until she turned 18. And one of the many ways I was able to get through the horrific trauma of living through the memories and the feelings was writing. And so I would just write and write and write and throw it in a box and throw it in a box. And then as I began speaking, articles, emails, I just had I had 5 boxes. And one day I said to my husband, I think I'm going to go to Vail for a couple of days. We have a condo in Vail. And I started thinking that I might write a book. And I went to Vail 3 days a week for months and ended up writing a book. And grateful that I did.
So can you share with folks a little bit about what your early family life was like?
I'm the youngest of 4 daughters. I'm not the prettiest girl in my family. We're all 2 years apart. I'm 85, 87, 89, 91.
Wow.
We're up there. My father was one of the outstanding businessmen in Denver. His obituary was on the front page of the Denver Post, which is unusual. He was a philanthropist. You just couldn't believe that this would happen in our family. And it was a trauma that I almost did not survive. 13 years.
Now, did the same thing happen to your sisters?
I can only talk about my eldest sister, and yes, it did.
Wow.
And she speaks about that.
So what was your mother's situation through this?
When I was 10, we moved into a large new home, and I begged for the maid's quarters. Down a long hallway, down 3 linoleum steps, then past a private bathroom, and then into a very small bedroom. It was not a good decision. My father was in my room one night. It was late for me. We didn't hear Mother coming down the hallway because it was carpeted, but she wore a dressy bedroom slipper called mules, and they have a hard heel. So when she first stepped on that linoleum step, we heard her, and everything stopped. And everybody knew what everybody was thinking. And then we waited for the next step. And then the next step, just 8 more steps, and she would be at my door. And then we heard the click, click, and she was going back down the hallway. And I knew that night my mother would never come through that door. My mother made a choice, and she did not choose me.
Wow. That had to be hard.
When I was, after my father, 3 years after my father died, I was deep in recovery, and I just felt like I had to talk to my mother. Did she know? There was never any doubt in my mind that she knew, but maybe she had sort of stuffed those memories someplace. So when I was 48, I'm thinking, I went to talk to her, and I was just doubled over with heaving sobs. And I got the words out, and I looked up, and she said, "I don't believe you.
Wow.
It's in your fantasy."
Wow.
And to her death at age 88, I just wanted her to say, "I am so sorry I did not protect you." She was living when my story became public, when I went to the cover of People magazine. In one of my talks, I talked about how when I confronted my father, he had a gun, and that ended up being on the front page of the paper. And I thought Mother would call and say, "Oh, you must have been so scared. I'm so sorry. How could I not have protected you?" Nothing. She only one time, and she was at our home often for dinner, just meaningless conversations. One time she called me. I had testified before a Senate subcommittee on family violence, and some of my testimony had drifted home. And Mother called, and she said, "You said something that really hurt me." And we're talking about after weeks and weeks of press. And I said, "And what was that?" And she said, "You said your father pried you open." I said, "I did say that, Mother. People are saying he abused me, and I felt I needed more vivid words." And she said, "Please don't say that again." And to her death at 88, never once said, "I'm sorry. How could I not have protected you?"
That alone had to be difficult.
I didn't get a mother or a father, but I married into the most incredible family. I married into the most loving, normal. They talked to each other every day. It was just, my marriage to Larry has been such a gift. We've been married 50 some years. Fell in love with him when I was 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, praise God for that.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about when this all came out? The Denver Post article, the People magazine, how did things transpire for you around that time?
So my life shut down completely. My daughter's age was always my trigger. So when she was 13 and starting puberty, that stopped my life. I had to completely stop my career of speaking and stay home and try to dress myself and get to therapy for 6 years. And I didn't know it was going to end. When I was 50, I checked myself into a psych ward. It was awful. And I didn't know that I was going to get through it. But when I was 51, I realized I hadn't sobbed in a couple of weeks, and I was able to go to the store, which I hadn't been able to do. And I began to know that I was going to come through this. And I thought if I ever did, I would go back to motivational speaking. But I knew that I could never do that. I knew that I had to help in some way. And so I literally looked up one day and I said, I want to help, but I don't know how. And if you'll show me the way, I'll do anything you ask. And I got my first job right away. I should have had some caveats in that deal. Anyway, one day I called a child abuse center, and I asked them if they would start an adult survivor program. And he said, "Come back with $250,000 and we'll do it." So I came back with $250,000.
Wow.
And we started an adult survivor program. And I said, my name can never, ever, ever be attached to this. I'm strictly wanting to help, but I cannot, Colorado's Miss America cannot be an incest survivor. This is just between us, the three of us. Well, a newspaper reporter learned, and the next morning it was on the front page of the Denver Post.
Wow.
And I just thought my life was over. My phone rang, and a woman said, "You need to have a press conference." And I said, "A press conference? Never." And she said, "They'll call your mother and your three sisters." And I said, "What time is the press conference?" And the next morning it was on the front page of the Rocky Mountain News and the Post, and they were calling my sisters. So I called my eldest sister, Gwen, in San Francisco, and I said, "If you want to go public with this, do it in San Francisco, but don't do it in Denver." because we're never going to get off the front pages. And the next morning, her story was on the front page with my picture. And our daughter had just come home from her sophomore year at Duke. And I said to Larry and Jennifer, I really have to get out of here. So we pulled on some sweats and we went to the track. We were jogging around the track and the woman with her 2 dogs came. We always said hello, but this time she stopped me. And she said, Marilyn, we're so proud of what you're doing. And I'm so grateful. Your sister Gwen came forward this morning. I had not been happy about that. And I said, really, why? And she said, because yesterday on our most popular radio talk show, people were calling in and saying, why should we believe her? Now that your sister has come forward, they will have to believe you.
Wow.
I looked at her and I said, if people are not going to believe 53-year-old me, then who is going to believe a child? I came home, I called both newspapers, 4 television stations, and I said, let's get to work.
Wow. Oh, goodness sakes.
So it was that one woman who changed the direction of my life.
Oh, goodness sakes.
Yeah.
That's
People
just
aren't believing me? Really? People aren't believing me? Really?
Well, I think things have changed since then. I think a lot of people believed you since then and really relied on you.
Well, yes. Yes, although my book was inducted into the Authors Hall of Fame, and I went to the dinner and a woman said to me, my husband still doesn't believe me. And I said, and you're still married? You're still married to him, really? Okay, we'll give him my best. Yeah. Yeah, it tells me more about him, really, than anything.
Of course, yeah. So what role has religion played throughout all of this?
Well, every night when I went down to the maid's room, my mother was kneeling in a child pose with her arms folded in prayerful position. She was reading the Bible. So I knew whatever was working for her wasn't going to work for me. But when I was 15, a new youth minister came to Montview Presbyterian Church. And I made a connection with him. And he was an incredible counselor. And I was in high school, so I was constantly bringing him teenagers so he could help them. And we formed a strong relationship. And he began to feel that behind my smile was a lot of pain. He was the only person who saw that. And then I did something that was so outrageous that he said 9 years later, now I'm 20, I met him when I was 15, now I'm 24. He said, now I know Marilyn is trying to destroy herself. I just have to figure out why. And we'd known each other so well, and my picture perfect family, I don't know how he ever could have asked me the question. But one day he said to me something about, did your father ever come into your room? And all my memories had been repressed until then. All my memories came up and I just started sobbing, and I sobbed for a lot of years. So he saved my life.
Wow.
And then when I was 51 and I looked up and said, please give me some jobs, I got my jobs. And when I saw the People magazine cover, it didn't say Marilyn overcomes rape. It said Miss America. Well, that's why I won. I didn't want to run. I was nominated by my sorority sisters. I didn't want to be Miss America. Please, I really don't want to do this. I'm on the ski team. I won Miss America. It said Miss America overcomes not incest, not rape, shame. That's what it's about.
Wow.
Miss America, that's why I won, overcomes shame. Whoever wrote that understands. It's about shame. Shame is our biggest issue. You can't know this about me.
Wow.
You will never want to speak to me again. So I've tried to make the word more speakable. So I got an email from a hospice nurse in New Jersey one day, and she said, we saw an interview of you on television, and after, a 94-year-old woman asked me to sit on her bed. She wanted to tell me something. Slowly, she said, I need to tell you something. I've never been able to tell anyone. When I was 7, I was sexually molested by my cousin, and I had to tell someone before I died.
Jeez.
Making the words more speakable, even as we're dying.
Wow. Wow. So what kinds of things are you involved in today? I assume you're still doing speaking. I know you're still writing or responding to letters.
My husband was very, very ill 2 years ago. And so I retired from speaking, although I am giving another speech in 2 weeks, but it's in Denver. I do emails. I spend a lot of time every day just responding, just bearing witness, just letting people know, I got here, you can do it, I'm here for you. Tell me what's going on today. How are you doing today? Just helping. I've emailed with some people for 25 years.
Wow.
It starts out 3 emails a day, and then maybe a year later it's 2 emails a day, and you have to answer immediately. If you don't answer immediately, the monkey chatter is, I knew I wasn't important enough. I know nobody cares. So if you're going to put yourself out there, it's like after a speech. If I'm going to open people up, 1,000 people, then I have to stay until every single person has said everything they need to say to me. If you open someone up, you can't just leave. They have to, you have to have some closure for that moment at least. So I've met tens of thousands of survivors of all ages. Of all ages.
Goodness.
Most of us are in our late 30s and early 40s when it all comes tumbling down. I would say, if I were to make a statistic, 90%
Wow.
of the emails I receive are from men and women between the ages of 35 and 45.
Wow.
No
That's
college
amazing.
kids. No college kids. No, very few in their early 20s. Later.
So have you thought about a follow-on book or any other new projects? I know, you do a lot already.
I said it all in one book. And there isn't anything I would change. And a publisher wanted to make some changes in it. She didn't like the title, Miss America by Day. I think that's exactly the title. I mean, what else? Miss America by Day. And she said, you really have 2 books in one, because part of my book is educating, urging parents to talk to their children, talking about how often does a child lie, which is researched at almost never. She said, I said, so you would make some changes? Yes. Would I have final say? No. I said, well, thank you for your interest, and bye-bye. No, no, this is exactly what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. I put it all out there. So now I'm 85 and my husband's 87, and much of my day is devoted to him. He supported me during times when I was in the psychiatric hospital in California. He came home and my daughter was in high school, and he said with tears streaming down his face, we've lost her. She'll come home, but she'll never be the same. And it was years of that. And now it's my turn to take care of him. I'm so grateful we have lived well into our 80s so that I can devote my life to him now.
Wow.
And emails.
Wow. Well, good for you. I mean, what an incredible story. And I'm so glad that you shared it with so many people and helped so many people. That's just such an outstanding model for the rest of us to follow.
My privilege. My privilege. So can I tell you about the Crown?
Oh, yes, sure, please.
So during the pandemic, teachers were literally driving to kids' homes trying to find ways to teach. And I learned that my crown was worth $20,000 or $30,000. Really? It is? So I sold my crown for $20,000. $20,000 that went directly to teachers. And it was so much fun to be a part of that process and take something. I talked to my granddaughter first, and I said, this is something that you hand down from generation to generation. It's a beautiful, beautiful crown. And I said, her name is Izzy. And I said to Izzy, I'm wondering how you would feel if instead of passing this crown down to you, if I sold it and we gave money to teachers. Oh, yes, Nanny. No, we want to give money to teachers. So that's what we did.
I bet the teachers were thrilled.
The teachers were thrilled. And Kathy Lindbergh is the one who bought it. She's just so generous. There was also a bracelet that went with it. So she's leaving, when she dies, she's leaving the crown to the Smithsonian and giving the bracelet to Izzy. Isn't that sweet?
Oh, goodness. Wonderful.
It's just so sweet.
Wonderful. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with folks while we have you here?
Just speak the words. You're not alone. It's not our shame. It is not our shame. The shame belongs on the perpetrator. And please talk to your children. And if you're a grandparent, have your children talk to their children, because 14-year-olds comprise the largest number of sex offenders of any age group. We can change this.
Wow. It is important.
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, Marilyn, again, thank you so much for everything and for joining us and sharing your story with us. Again, the name of the book is Miss America by Day, Lessons Learned from Ultimate Betrayals and Unconditional Love. And please check out Marilyn's website, missamericabyday.com. Marilyn, again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful day.